Holly Ann, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I've been seeing your stuff going on online and etc. And I'm glad that we arranged to kind of have this conversation because I know I've met you when you came to the UK, and I know that I adore your work. You know, being in Australia and being ahead of us in the UK based on where you're at in your kind of challenges or your vocation in raising the profile of child abuse or child protection, should I say. And I really, in my international work, I love the fact that Australia is ahead of the game, so the book that you've got, which, I'm a proud fan of, this one, someone should have known. And I know that, I recommend this lots to SEN schools, etc. So yeah, I love your work, and I think in me kind of publicizing this, in kind of promoting the message I want to get across, both of us want to get across, I think, introduce who you are so people know if they've never heard of you, Holly Ann, because I do talk about you quite a lot, Holly Ann. Who's Holly Ann? So tell us.
Thank you, that's kind. Hi, I'm Holly Ann Martin, Managing Director of Safe for Kids. And Safe for Kids is a West Australian company that focuses on creating resources and training on child abuse prevention. We travel in every state and territory, but with COVID, ironically, I've gone international. So, we went to the UK back 2 years ago, and a month before that we're in the US. And in both countries, we were told that we were ahead of our time. And so it's been fascinating because back in February, before the virus hit the world, it was in China, but it wasn't as well known. My husband and I went to Qatar, and I presented at a conference at Qatar because we thought, it was the IPSACAM conference. And, Australia is a big country, but we're a very small population. So we thought, because we were told that there's nothing like our resources, and as you know, we talk about abuse prevention from the age of 3, and then I say that we need to talk about pornography from the age of 6. And even in Qatar, the response was overwhelmingly positive for our resources and stuff. So
good. So that's why, again, being in Australia, being ahead, and I've always said that in every, the jobs that I do in my safeguarding roles, I'm always kind of reminding people internationally where we're at, and the fact that in the in your country, in Australia, yes, you are being more open and frank with young people, because in the job that I do, frontline child protection, social worker investigating, we heard lots of times of it being a pattern of abuse, reoccurring incidents where people were not aware of it. And no one's ever told a child, for example, that the mouth is a private part. We have cute names for private parts, which we shouldn't do. And that's more about the embarrassment of the parent or the adults rather than the child. So I know in the UK, we're going to have compulsory relationship sex education from September. And I know that also includes early years. And I know that, yes, like ears, eyes, nose, mouth, we'll also have penis, vagina, and, anus, buttock, reminding us that they're all different things rather than just bum. So that's why I felt, in a conversation today, we can, whether you're a parent listening to this, whether you're a colleague, professional colleague, a student listening to it, I suppose we're here to kind of raise a profile and remind people that, whether it's in your personal life or professional, or just, being a citizen wherever you are, there are going to be young people, both adult survivors, but also young people, some verbal, non-verbal, language barriers, etc., who are right now have experienced or experiencing or will in the future. So we have to be mindful of that. And Holly Ann and I both know that in some cultures, it's very, very taboo to even talk about sex before marriage. Not that we are talking about it, but body parts, and things that happen. So yeah, Holly Ann.
And so it's really important that, I'm glad you brought that up, because, there's so much research that shows that if kids are using the correct anatomical names for their body parts, that alone could be a protective factor. We had an expert here that her name was Professor Frida Briggs. In fact, we got her from you. She was an English bobby who came to Australia and then got out of the police force and became a professor, and she would interview perpetrators in prison, and they would tell her if a child was using the proper words, they would leave them alone because it's going to be easier for the child to disclose. Here in Australia, one of the classic names for girls' private parts, and I understand it came from South Africa originally, but girls call their front private parts a cookie. You know, if a child goes to a teacher and says, somebody touched my cookie, they're going to go, well, don't be mean and share it around. They're not going to understand. So, you know, just knowing the words, even, you know, most of us know what a fanny is in Australia and, you know, UK, it's the front part of a girl, but in the US, it's actually your bottom.
I know,
So,
I know.
So, you know, we don't call this a flim flam flibbity jib, and yet we'll have words, you know, for private body parts, and it's because of the embarrassment.
I know. You're absolutely right. So when I do training in frontline settings, I use penis vagina a lot, you know, touching, masturbation, whatever it might be in the context of safeguarding. And I know that a lot of people do not copy me in that. They don't, meaning people in the room find it very uncomfortable to say that word, and they're adults. And how can we, you know, navigate the world if we can't ourselves feel comfortable with those words? So I think, you know, any person who's listened to this, who's a parent or relative, family friend, or even a colleague, professional, that's a starting point, isn't it? If we're not able to say it, then how are children going to model that?
That's exactly right. I say to people, if you can't say vulva, how do we expect a 5-year-old to say it? And that's why we believe that we need to start protective education by 3 at the latest. You know, if parents are wiping their child's bottom, hopefully they get consent, because consent's another big thing that, you know, is really important. But if, you know, the mum says, oh, you know, I'm just wiping around your testicles, or I'm just, you know, washing your penis because it's got poo on. When it's a parent with their child and they're little, it doesn't, and kids grow up with that, it's no big deal for them.
Yeah, it's part of the body, exactly. And like you said, we're still hearing those horrible names, but not the actual name. So I know in the UK, vagina, penis is a word that we'll be teaching them through that curriculum, it being a bodily part, you know, rather than like, you know, all the other names that kind of come up for it. So yeah,
like you said earlier, are they including the mouth? Because in some countries, they won't, and I won't mention the country, but I've been to it several times and had lots of very heated conversations because they just won't accept the mouth as a private part.
Yeah, so definitely mouth, it can be seen as a private part based on what could happen to it. And I was in a country, again, I won't mention the country, last year, August, where I was doing a safeguarding in a local school. And what came up was I couldn't talk about sexual body parts. And I was thinking, well, if we're talking about abuse, we have to be mindful of that also includes sexual body part. And mouth, I think, is an important part. And yes, you know, in the job that frontline investigation, we do hear that quite often, whether it's French kissing or inappropriate kissing to other things going on. So yes, and I know when we were talking before, Holly-Ann, about in some cultures, you know, I've been to some countries again where I've been told straight up, you can't talk about sex in the session because it's taboo. You know, we only get married when we're 21. No one talks about it in society. So again, it's so taboo that it can happen and no one's talking about it. So again,
that, you know, that the people that prey on children, you know that, and they prey on that. That's, you know, it just helps them. I mean, one of the really useful things that might help people is I teach children the sign language for public and private. And public, so you 2 hands together and you make a half circle. And then the sign for private is your hand in front of your mouth. And then you pretend you've got a key and you're locking your lips. So flat hand, turn the key. And, you know, that just makes sense to kids because your mouth is a private part and sometimes what you say can be private. So it's not, adults tend to overthink things. In my experience, and what about this and what about that, and well, actually, because I've been teaching this program for over 35 years, and you know, 6-year-olds don't think like that. You've had, you know, 20 or 30 or 50 years experience, whereas a 6-year-old, you give them a rule, nobody touches your private parts. That's the rule. You break the rule. Kids, you know, love rules. So it you know, and that's why I spend so much time trying to educate adults about it is not sex education. It is simply one of the cute things I do with the kids. You know, you know the song Head, Shoulders, Knees and Toes? So it's head, shoulders, knees and toes, head, shoulders, knees and toes. And then you put your hand near your groin and you say, penis on a boy, vagina on a girl, bob down, stand up, do a little twirl.
That's good. Penis on a boy, vagina on a girl. Good. I remember that. That's really good. Yeah.
Sorry about the bad singing. But, you know,
Right.
kids are little sponges and they're not scared and they're not, you know, people think, oh, you're taking, I've had it said to me thousands of times, you know, your program is taking away children's innocence.
Innocence, I know. Yeah, the innocence is not a good thing. I know, because I'm thinking as you're saying that peer on peer abuse. Yeah, so children, so not only adults but also peers or relatives, family, friends, whatever. Again, when you're hearing it from an investigative side, hence being social worker frontline, you know, when it's been discovered again from some, you know, children really tell us it's discovered along the way. Again, it's them not knowing that that game was not suitable, etc., etc. Hence non-recent abuse, again, where people are talking about as adults now recognizing that thing that they did with such and such whoever was actually wrong, i.e. inappropriate and now harmful and abuse. So I think it's important.
And you know, I'm so glad that you mentioned that. I mean, I didn't get it out, you might have got it. You know, I had to write a book about child-to-child abuse because it's the orange one. Have you got it there? Doesn't matter if you haven't.
Yes, I have. Yes.
But, you know, I had to write that because I had a principal contact me in the 2 months before he rang me. He had 6 separate cases of child-to-child abuse in his school. All separate cases, all not on each other. And when the Department for Child Protection investigated every case, it led back to the kids having seen pornography. And so, you know, it just goes through 5 private rules. No one's allowed to touch your private parts unless it's for medical or hygiene reasons, and the adult has to get your consent. You're not allowed to touch anybody else's private parts. If you do, you're breaking the law. No one's allowed to show you private pictures. No one's allowed to take private pictures of you, and you're not allowed to take private pictures of yourself. Because according to our federal police here in Australia, children as young as 4 are getting their iPads and taking private pictures of themselves. I'm sure you've heard similar stories.
Yeah, that's why I love this picture you've got in here of the girl there. So apologies for that, but it is in your book. But I think you're absolutely right. And I know one of the cases I had in a setting where a child who was 7 took a selfie nudie and sent it to another child, because think about the society we're in. You know, kids are growing up where their parents are taking half semi-naked pictures. I say that as in whether it's on the beach or social media, whatever, you know, and they're getting a message, actually, it's okay. You know, this is normal. So, you know, we're the kind of party poopers in one way, say, no, it's not fun. But I think they're all the kind of discreet, subtle messages that don't help with the message that we're trying to set. So culturally, again, I think I was explaining that whether it's there's some cultures where it's more taboo because religion, or there's some other aspects where it removes the voice of the child, or it being seen as sinful, you know, or whatever the word might be in that language. So I know a colleague of mine wrote this from a perspective of Africa. So I did a webinar recently. I know we're doing both a lot of work, but international webinar with international schools, and the schools from very remote places. When I show them this kind of book about a young girl from the perspective of culture where it takes a village to grow a child, they've recognised in a culture perspective, no one's challenging or understanding what could be going on harmful. So this is a very good book. I mean, she asked me to write the foreword, and I was very honoured to be part to write the foreword, to introduce it as a UNICEF kind of rights of the child. But it was about a little girl again, and sadly her dad goes to work in town and her uncle's looking after her, and she loves him, but she doesn't like the sort of games he tries to play, and she's unable to tell her mum, and then by the end she feels confident, she breaks down and tells her mum. But it's just really educating. I know that you said in Asia you had a few similar challenges, didn't you?
Yeah, I'm really excited to see that book. I'll be definitely buying it tomorrow, because I've been mentoring some three separate women from 3 different organisations in India, and one of them was telling me how, because of COVID, in India, you know, everything locked down. If you were in a house and you were staying in that house, and she was telling me exactly the same story about an 8-year-old whose uncle was abusing her, But of course, you know, because of the taboo and things, the mum's saying, no, you can't, you know, you can't say anything, and things like that. So, you know, we have to start advocating for children. And, you know, protective education doesn't go across, you know, it does cover the UN rights of the child. You know, it's not against any religion, and child abuse doesn't distinguish either. It goes across every socioeconomic area, every religion, every culture.
Absolutely. So the very wealthy, affluent school or child family, you know, again, there's also been an element of barriers of why the child's unable to say it. A bit like domestic abuse in the reality of women and men, you know, how you suffer in silence, is discreet, the abuser potentially is around you. And I think it's really important. Language is so important. So I always say the abuser is a person until we discover the abuse, then they're an abuser. You know, there are no people walking around with abuser on their forehead. Do you know what I mean? It's more around anyone. And that could be a child or you know, or an adult. It could be people known to the child or online pretending to be a child, or even child on child. So like, you know, that's why when I met you, I really connected with you, you know, even it was online and we met in person, because like me, you're very similar with that vocation of, come on people, wake up. It is happening. So, you know, my argument is right now, there's somebody who's thinking about it, who's working on it. Right now, there's somebody who is being harmed. Right now, there's somebody who has been harmed, who's not aware they've been harmed or wants to say and can't. And that model will continue, you know, and whether, you know, whether, and depending on where they are in the world, they may not have a voice. So our role is to kind of, you know, support them around their well-being, but also be mindful of it continues to happen.
Yeah. And, you know, we know with online trafficking of children, how in some countries, you know, parents are using their own children to make child exploitation to feed the family and stuff like that. You know, I'm ashamed to say that there's been a sting here in Australia where, you know, one of our banks has been pinged because they've been sending money and not asking the question, why is all this money?
Yeah.
And,
wow.
You know, I mean, I'm not sure what statistics you use in your training, but I say 1/3 of children will suffer some form of sexual abuse before their 18th birthday. And that's
one of our main charities says 1 in 20 kids, you know, suffer sexual abuse. And then when you think about unreported, it'll be maybe 1 in 10.
Well, I say 1/3 because usually those statistics are the hardcore stuff. People don't, you know, if a child sees pornography, that is child sexual abuse. If somebody flashes a child at a bus stop, that is child sexual abuse. But sometimes, you know, that kids might not tell us. So it's the whole spectrum of, you know, and now with pornography being so accessible, you know, basically every child's going to be abused because, you know, again, in Australia, I think it's 90% of boys and 65% of girls have seen it by the age of 18. I mean, come on. and when I say pornography to adults, they go back to their childhood and think about, you know, maybe a Playboy magazine under dad's bed or in the brother's cupboard. That's not what kids are seeing.
No, that's what I make a point of. It's hardcore. So I was saying in society, what I saw about, say, 15 years ago, or even before that, maybe 20 years ago, was a shift of Mayfair and Playboy being kind of the softer amateur, not even amateur, but softer kind of, you know, non-frontal, but more bodily images of women and men being appreciated in art forms, I suppose, or naked and nudity, compared to the vulgar, hard, violent stuff that are in hardcore. And I think, I'm not sure what it's like in Australia, but I know in the UK, our billboards, our adverts are very kind of that of, when you're even in shop displays, whether it's lingerie or fashion, it's very, very naked as far as flesh and being out there. So now body cleavage or legs or whatever it might be based on nudity is part of everyday society. So it only leaves space for the hardcore porn to be the pornography. Do you know what I mean?
And that's only, you know, society is grooming our children for perpetrators. We're also, you know, teaching children to be quiet. I've been doing these series of videos with a policewoman from the eastern states who's a survivor, and we did a thing on grooming, And I had a beautiful mum contact me about how she wasn't groomed. Her grandfather was exposing himself and masturbating in front of her for 16 years, but he never ever told her don't say anything. But her mother had mental health issues, so she, she knew not to talk about the mental health issues. So she definitely knew not to talk about from 4.
Yeah. You mean,
Knew not to talk about the grandfather. So we are making it so easy for perpetrators. They're sitting at home, especially with COVID, got all this time on their hands, got access to our children through the internet. They're having a whale of a time.
And that's what we're saying. So in the moment in the UK, we're getting ready for returning in September for schools. So the last few weeks, I've done quite a few webinars on the impact of COVID on children. And one of them is about the increase of things they're exposed to right now, or including abuse online, including the fact they're not seeing their friends, maybe doing more daring things online. We know that on the dark net, the people who pose a risk to children know where to go, in what apps and what forums to go, where there's children who are a bit more vulnerable. So yeah, I do believe definitely it hasn't made it easy, as in the impact and the reality of, again, parents not understanding screen time, what children are getting involved in. And, I heard a colleague say the other day that when people say, oh, I don't do technology, I don't do social media, and you're in a safeguarding role or working with children, that's quite dangerous, because you need to. In order to understand risk of safeguarding, you need to understand that, rather than it's too techie for me. So, yeah, I think our challenges are culture. Our challenges are people not understanding social media, not understanding IT, or even understanding how these people who deliberately have intentions to pose and harm children, pose a risk and harm children, are grooming. So we say grooming. I heard in one country, one Caribbean island, calling it kind harm. I know, kind harm, because it's harmful, but it's kind, because meaning how they do it is kind. It's not angry. It's kind harm. That's what we call grooming, kind harm.
That's interesting. When I'm working with Aboriginals in remote communities, because English is their second language, I call it friending them up. They friend up kids to get their trust, and the local people understand that and are very grateful, because they've, it's just not part of their world. But when you use the language that they understand, it makes it more real for them.
Yeah, and I will say like language. So I say harmful behavior. So if someone's caused harm to you rather than abuse. Abuse is very adult, very professional, child abuse. But on the front line, I think we need to get used to the words like, are you feeling comfortable? Someone, unkind to you, or did they harm you in any way? And how, the harm is very powerful under any category, but clearly about sexual, or did something you didn't, you didn't want to happen. All of those kind of soft conversations. And again, the parent, the relative, picking up on when you go to a certain person's house in your family, or whatever it might be, the nervousness that it creates for one of your, your children or the person, whatever it might be, because they're massive indicators. Going back to consent, go and kiss your uncle, go and kiss your auntie. Don't want to. Go on. How that looks,
Oh, and exactly. Funnily enough, I did a talk last week for a local Rotary Club, and there were 30 people in the room, only 3 women. Everybody else was a grandfather. And when I said to the grandfathers, the greatest gift you'll give your grandchildren is teaching them about consent. And if you ask to kiss them or put them on your knee, and one grandfather just took absolute issue with me and wanted to, he was really, I'm not a pedophile. I'm not going to touch my grandchildren. They're my grandchildren. I should be allowed. And I talked him down off the roof, basically. But people just, when you say consent, people go sex.
I know.
Consent's got nothing to, it's body autonomy. It's kids owning their bodies. We're not talking about the Sex Act. We're talking about empowering children. And that needs to start when they're this big. And, I know if you're safeguarding in the early years, educating educators to, I would never pick up a child without saying, can I pick you up?
Yeah, I know. But also, give me a high five. You're like, yeah, how's it going? Boop. You don't have to kiss. Say bye. If it's about connection, fine. You can do that in lots of different ways. So I know in the UK we had a colleague, Jane Evans. I think you know of her in the UK. She went on TV.
I saw it.
Yeah. They were like
I
attacking.
felt for her.
I know, but she was right. You know, actually, we need to be asking our children, because going back to what you said about from they hear it from young, then their friends can't do it. Then they know, they're equipped to say, actually, I didn't say you could, you know, and then that person's, you know, scavenges away somewhere else. Or because we know about, again, resilience and empathy. So, you know, your books are really good. Hence Australia. Your colleague Janie, I know she's got the book about resilience. So what people aren't doing is teaching resilience, are they? They're not teaching the whole fact that children need to be and have the whole kind of language of telling where people to go. So your books are great. So your books, again, I use them in training to like the stories that they are. This one's about valuable lesson about private means just for you. Yeah.
That one happens all the time. You know, it's about a little boy that looks over the wall at a little girl. I don't know in the UK, but in Australia, happens, you know, a lot in schools. And so it was just a way of being able to introduce public and private and name the body parts, but also talk about rooms, public and private rooms, places, and just give kids really clear messages.
And this one I like as well. Learns a valuable lesson, Matilda.
Oh, where my poor old uncle used to take out his teeth and go, give me a kiss. Again, it's about unwanted touching, but there's nothing sexual about that book. So that was my first, and it's sort of, they go in a series because each one builds on the others, and that's.
This is a good one, again, especially in COVID. This is definitely one that I'll be talking about a lot, you know, with my kind of settings. But generally, I talk about them generally, but this is one I think definitely right now you've got to be thinking about online.
Thank you.
And thinking about, no, it's fine, because I think a lot of people, the average person is taking that for granted. Like I've got 2 children, I've got a 12-year-old and a 16, and they both know the phone is dangerous like a knife is, and I can't give you this and not support you in understanding the dangers of it. And a lot of people don't understand that. They don't understand that the internet is good for learning and playing and socializing, but also there's another part of it that parents need to be really aware of and monitor and trust their child, but appreciate the people who they pose a risk, you know?
It's really interesting. I don't know if you have an e-safety commissioner or something equivalent in the UK, but here in Australia, we've got a government department called the e-safety commission. So if a child's cyberbullied or, you know, shared intimate images and stuff like that. And they put out a report last week to say that 1 in 5 children goes on the internet with no supervision and, you know, all day, every day. And so, you know, those kids have been at home in lockdown, and when that school goes back, when I'm talking to parents, I say, think back to when your child believed in Father Christmas. And there was always that one child that wanted to tell the whole class there's no Father Christmas. There's going to be that one child that's been watching something or, you know, talking to someone that's going to come and want to show that to everybody for you know, to get the accolade or whatever. And so I'm so grateful that you've been doing all these talks about COVID, because, you know, when everything comes down, you know, we're going to hear more about domestic violence. We're going to hear more about child sexual abuse, because for some children, you know, school's the only safe place they've got.
I know. And I think this kind of overview of what we're talking about today is reminding the average person, again, personally, professionally, about the reality of abuse and how it's happening around us, you know, and it will continue to happen. And we might know someone in our circle who could be part of that, but also being a person who's been involved themselves, has happened to them. And thinking about boys, you know, living in a very homophobic world, if they've been abused by another boy, they're questioning sexuality, lots of things where, again, in the homophobic world, they might not feel comfortable telling anyone for whatever reason. And, you know, seeing past behavior of someone and finding what the trouble is behind that, you know, the troubled person. Likewise, in some cultures where it's very taboo or very religion. So there's lots of things internationally. And I'm sure, like you, every country you go, there's going to be a challenge. Up to last December, Holly-Ann, I got someone who said to me, no, in my culture, this doesn't happen. He stood up in front of his peers and they were embarrassed for me to think, I really can't believe that my colleague has done this. Really, I thought, because I touched a nerve, the nerve being, he got offended because he felt I insulted him based on what I was saying about the whole world, you know?
Yeah.
And I've had that again in some countries when I've done a keynote. I've had people from certain departments who are very, like, you know, the Ministry of Education or whatever it might be in that country to say, I'm sorry, our country, we don't do that here. I'm like, okay, who am I to challenge a male in a community and society where, you know, I have no say, you know? So I think as people, as women, as men, as peers, as colleagues, we just need to be like us, you and I, you know, the elephant in the room, the person who's saying something, because that action is potentially saving, protecting. And we know also for research, in the UK, we've got the Lucy Faithfull Foundation, and they do lots of research around how the offender thinks and works. And we know it's multiple, over decades, half of them started in their 20s or maybe in their childhood, and they've never been caught.
Well, a fascinating thing on Netflix is a documentary about the doctor from Team USA for the gymnastics. Over 500 children he abused, and everybody thought he was a great bloke. And my other worry for international stuff is, you know, if a child does disclose, if they, you know, find somebody that will listen to them, in many countries, there are not the procedures. The police don't have, you know, the procedures. In some countries, they'll get a backhander and, you know, they just get swept under the carpet.
Right. So in some countries, there are no laws, you know, and also women offend too. So I know in some countries, there are places where they don't police check women in roles working with children because they believe women don't abuse. So I know in the UK, we've got more research in the last 2 years about the increase of children talking about being abused by women, whether it's, again, auntie, you know, mum's best friend, sibling, whatever. But again, it's about society seeing that as harmless because they're women and they're maternal and they care, you know? So I think we've got a lot of work to be doing here. We need to get some more people to join us, Holly-Ann, but you can see.
We need an army. When I spoke in Qatar, the very first keynote on the very first day, the very first slide he put up said 1 billion children are abused every year. I just burst into tears. I'm sitting in this auditorium with 1,500 people just crying my eyes out. It was embarrassing.
Yeah.
Seeing that on a world stage, because, you know, I'm used to working in, you know, Australia, and I know how bad it is here. But when you see that up, you know, mounted on a wall, 1 billion children.
I know.
It's overwhelming.
I know, it certainly is. And I think our role is to ensure that we are those advocates to spread the positive stories around how we need to be mindful of the care and the love that we have and challenging. So we need to have doubt all the time. So when you don't have doubt, that's how people succeed, don't they? There's no challenge. So I remember years ago when my daughter was younger, a family friend saying, her daughter was playing, and she went up to her daughter's room and their relatives were around playing, and she walked in and her male cousin was on top of her daughter on the bed. And after thinking, was she asking me for my kind of advice on it, or was it just a comment? And I told her I think a few months after, when I kind of worked out what it was. And I said to her, be mindful of, did you talk to your daughter about that day? What happened? Because again, that's how it looks. You know, she could have walked in. It could have been a game. It could have been, you know, but either way, what excuse, you know, what's the reason why it happened? There is no reason. You know, you tell me a valid reason why that would happen. And that's what I think people forget. You know, when they say, go upstairs and play, that's fine. But what are they playing? You know, be more vigilant. So I always say, have an ongoing culture of vigilance. That's what I do in my home. So my children know that mummy creeps up the stairs and jumps out on them sometimes, knowing that, gotcha. And they're so used to it now, they're like, yeah, whatever. But the point is, they are aware that, you know, even if they go over to places, I might pick them up a bit early, you know, whatever it might be. There's always got to be some, you know, something out of the ordinary that you are ensuring that you're checking on.
And also, I love that point. Parents need to advocate for their children. You know, when your child, the amount of kids, again, I don't know if it's the same in the UK and other places that people are watching this, but parents just send their kid off on a play date. I don't know who's there. You have to go through, you have to say to the other parent, you know, meet the other parent, not just push them through the gate, find out what their, you know, standards are around technology. You don't want your kid playing Fortnite for 6 hours. You know, tell them, my child knows you know, abuse prevention education, whatever terminology you might use. Find out if there are going to be teenagers there and who's going to be there. And, you know, I could tell some horror stories about different,
I can imagine. And even on play dates when you're having a shower. So some parents, like when I grew up, my mum was very strict because she did a similar job to me, and I wasn't allowed play dates. So I was challenged with that when I had my two, but I equipped them with, you know, what they need to. They wear their pajamas, they go in the bathroom, they shut the door, they lock the door. So again, I'm aware that the protective factors of, or have a shower when you come home, you know. So we are aware there are times in certain places where they're not around you that they could be deemed as vulnerable, and the average parent wouldn't think of that, would they? If anything, they want to encourage socialization. And of course, you can go with your friend, rather than what are the risks there? What are they watching on TV? Who comes to that household? Do you know the families? Do you know their morals and values based on, you know, the principles of boundaries and guidance, you know? So, yeah, I think, again, there's scope to be done around people, again, internationally, not discriminating, meaning any person, whether, again, you're a relative or family friend or even professional, being that person to be asking questions continuously to people we know, because the more we don't, the bigger the gap is, and the more people are able to abuse. So yeah, I'm glad that we touched base, because I know when I spoke to you last week, I just love the work you're doing over there around, even during COVID, the reality of the increase, and parents not being aware of that, and parents seeing it as their kids are bored, they're online. What are they doing online? Even webcams, you know, the whole thing there about live streaming, what that means. And I won't mention the name of the company, but there's an app that children dance to and do kind of music to. It's been barred in, begins with T, but it's been barred in India. Did you know that? India barred it because it's content. Yeah. So
ironically, here in Australia on the weekend, in our big national papers, they had a full page ad talking about, don't worry, we don't do anything with your data.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not my worry. I don't care what you do with people's data. You can stick that up the wazoo. I'm worried about the inappropriate content that you're letting kids do, and the grooming and all this other stuff.
And we've heard in the UK that apparently they're going to be doing educational resources as well. So again, it's interesting about commercial industry, marketing, and children love it, don't they? Because, and then there are some positives in it, a little bit I've seen, as in it's very resourceful in relation to finding out other kind of hacks or whatever it might be, or things, you know, exercises, whatever, recipes, I get all that, to the horrible part. And I think at the moment, any kind of forum, there's going to be people kind of sabotaging that with the reality of knowing there's opportunities. And again,
look, when we all went online with Zoom, and there was all that Zoom bombing of people exposing themselves or putting up pornography in children's classrooms. You know, that the second, you know, people unfortunately will always find a way to get to children.
Of course they will. And the thing is, they're very clever at how they do it as well, because they know how to pitch to a kid in the language within 3 minutes. I've seen the live chat sometimes, and within like the fourth line, bam, they're in, as far as they've got the child, they've melted the child, they're engaging in a way that the child then trusts them. It doesn't take long.
Well, I don't think it's very popular now, but there was chat roulette, where you were talking to somebody for 60 seconds. They could groom somebody within 60 seconds. We're getting on so well, why don't we go off into such and such and keep talking? And within 60 seconds, they had kids hooked.
I know. And also in the UK, we're also been promoting to parents about online and offline. So it starts online, doesn't it? And then it goes offline, and offline being on the child's phone separately, away from it all, where no one can monitor that in that way, rather than through the forum they've met. And again, the job that I do, I've seen an increase of kids get sent random messages on random apps or random this and that they respond to, thinking because it's in my personal phone, they know me, rather than actually someone's through the, you know, when you join a new app or something and you press connect through another app and it goes through. So they don't realize that their data and information is being shared with lots of people, and actually it's easy to get information about children, you know? So yeah, so there you go. But I'm glad we've touched base, because I think we're just highlighting there's not a lot. People need to be a bit more savvy like us in the reality of danger for children, the reality of there are people in that we will know, whether family or friends, who have been harmed in such ways that they're not able to say anything. And again, the challenges that we have internationally with no one talking about body parts, or the increase of children being indoors right now, where there could be, you know, a higher risk of abuse, physical, emotional neglect, and especially sexual, you know, how it's all done nicely, the harm, you know, how the kind of exploitation and kindness, cultures like, you know, the proverbs of villages to grow children. There's certain things where people really believe in and are proud of. And one thing I do get across the world is everyone's proud of their culture. And that's like a badge to say, yeah, I'm proud to be part of this group. And that's good, but we have to remember, we also have to be ensuring that we promoting safety of children. And every child's got a voice and got a right to be protected, you know.
Perfect.
So thank you. So, you want to kind of, any comments before we kind of come to the end?
Just for your followers, on this Saturday, I don't know when you're going to post it, but this Saturday I'm involved with a whole day free conference online about pornography. There's experts from all over and different nationalities will be speaking.
So Saturday, 25th of July,
yep.
It is. Yeah.
And then on the 6th to the 9th of August, I'm involved with an international conference with 3 other speakers. So if people are interested, if you share it before then, I'll come in and put the links. Otherwise, if people just want to follow my Safe for Kids Facebook page, they'll find all the information there.
Okay, no problem. Thank you for that. Thank you. I really appreciate you talking. And again, on social media, what's your handle, Holly?
So Safe, the number 4 Kids.
Okay, thank you. So yes, I just both thank you for, you know, talking to me today. And yes, we will be sharing this, and hopefully if you're watching it and you found it useful, you can contact me on amc@annemariechristian.com, Holly Ann at her website, Safe, number 4 Kids in Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yes, her books, I really recommend her books. Again, the book I showed again is on Amazon. Again, I'll share it in the link, but please look after yourselves. And if you have heard this and it's touched something for you about yourself or someone you know, please seek help. In every country, there's a helpline to help people to talk about abuse of some sort. So please look after yourself. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.